Okay, third grade. Here are some of the questions that you had for Mr. Roan. I'm going to ask them to him, and he will answer them the best he can. Here's Mr. Roan and Nika.
Hello.
All right. Question number 1. Dear Mr. Roan, did one of the bees ever sting you?
Well, that's a good question. Yes. I definitely get stung a lot at first, but you get to know how to work with the bees and be very calm and slow, and they're very gentle. They don't want to sting you because when they do sting you, they die. So you have to be threatening their life or really messing with them if they're going to sting you.
So that's why bees sting people?
So that's why bees sting people, to protect the hive or to protect them themselves. Yeah.
Great. How long do bees live for until they die?
Well, that's a cool question. It depends on what time of year they're born. So if a bee hatches in the springtime or in the summer where there's lots of work to do, they could just live a couple of weeks because they literally work themselves to death. But bees who are born later in the season in the fall, so they'll live all winter long for months. So it really depends on the time of year and how much work there is to do.
Are the bees' jobs difficult?
Oh, yeah. In a day, they'll visit thousands and thousands of flowers. That's a pretty hard job if you ask me. They go and they hop from flower to flower all day, collecting nectar and pollen and then bringing it back to the hive. So they don't, and that's not their only job. Their job changes depending on how old they are. So at first they're nurse bees, and then they're house bees, and then they're foraging bees, and then they're protectors.
Great. So who was the first one to discover bees?
Oh, well. I don't think anybody could really say that, can really answer that question. But beekeepers have been around since prehistoric times. Actually, there's a really cool cave painting from thousands of years ago of bee hunters. So before we humans figured out how to keep bees in boxes like we do, they would hunt them. So if you came across a honeybee in a field, you would do your best to follow the bee as quick as you can to follow it all the way back to the hive, and then they would take the honey from the hive where they found it in some hollow tree or in a cave or something. So a long time.
Okay. Can bees excrete waste?
Oh, yes they do. Bees definitely poop. In the wintertime, they huddle together in a mass, and because they're a really clean animal, they don't ever poop inside the hive. So they go on what's called a cleansing flight, and they go flying outside, and they let it go out in the air, and it drops to the ground, and then they come back into the hive. And so that's what it's like during the regular year too. When they're flying around, they just do their business. It's like it's yellow poop.
What is a wax cap, and how does a baby bee sprout in a wax cap?
Oh, well, the beehive, like you saw in the other video, has frames, and in each frame there's a wax comb, and each of the little cell is like a pocket, and the queen lays eggs inside the pocket, and then once the egg grows to become a larva, it gets covered with wax by the other bees. And then it emerges through the wax cell. But they also use wax cappings for when honey becomes perfect. They use the cells for laying eggs and for storing honey. So they put nectar into the cell, and it slowly dehydrates. It gets less and less water in it, and it gets thicker. And when it's just the right amount of thickness, they put a white wax capping on it. And that's when you know when the honey is ripe and good for eating.
How do the bees get honey from the flower?
So it's not honey when they get it from the flower. It's nectar when they collect it from the flower. They have these long proboscis tongues. They come sticking right out of their mouth. And when they visit flowers, just like Nika is licking her paws, when they visit flowers, they use their tongue to get in and suck nectar out of the inside of the plant. And they put the nectar in their honey stomach. And then when they go back to the hive, they regurgitate the honey from their honey
Which
stomach.
means throw up?
Which means throw up, yeah. They throw up the nectar into a cell, and Actually, in the other video, hopefully you saw it, there's a lot of what looks like clear liquid in the cells, and it's really liquidy at first, but over time they fan their wings inside the hive to move air around to dehydrate the nectar, and dehydrate means to dry up. So less and less water, and they know exactly when it's perfectly right, like I said, and they put the wax cap on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool question.
How do bees die from pesticides?
Oh, well. So there's lots of problems, and I know that I heard all of the questions already, so I know that you guys are really interested in why the bees are vanishing and why they're disappearing. There's this thing called colony collapse disorder. I hope you've heard this term before. But what happens, they're not exactly sure why colony collapse disorder happens, but the best guess is that when bees are visiting flowers, and because they visit so many flowers, right, we're talking tens of thousands, millions of flowers, that it doesn't take a lot of pesticide on each of those flowers to come back to the hive to make a big impact. So if a bee visits 1 million flowers in its life and gets just a little bit of pesticide from this flower and a little bit of pesticide from that flower and brings it back to the hive with pollen and nectar, then the hive becomes really full of pesticide. So the bees kind of, not on purpose or they don't want to do this, but they end up collecting lots of pesticide in the box where they're keeping their home, and then that's really bad. One of the biggest problems with pesticides in plants and bees is they have this new kind of chemical. It's called a neonicotinoid, and they have an interesting way of treating the seed of the plant, not the actual plant. And so when they treat just the seed with this chemical, every part of the plant, the stem, on the flower and the stamen and the fruit, every part of the plant has pesticide in it. So when the bee visits the plant, it gets pesticide even though it doesn't want it. So just a little at a time, that's how they collect the pesticide.
Okay. In a video, somebody wrote this, in a video I saw a beekeeper spraying something into the beehive. Why do they spray it, and what's in it that calms them down?
Okay. Well, I'm sure what you saw was a beekeeper using a smoker. So it's a canister, a metal canister that you fill, and you make what I do is I make a little fire with sticks and paper and stuff, and I fill it with leaves and pine needles, and it makes a lot of smoke. And you puff it, and the smoke comes billowing out of the smoker. And what it does, when the bees are around smoke, they think that the hive is on fire, and so they get really worried, and they think that they're going to have to leave because their hive is on fire. They're going to evacuate, just like the fire alarm goes off at school. And so what they do is they're trying to fill their bellies with honey so they have enough food to sustain them if they're going to have to go for a long way. And when they're doing that, they're more worried about eating honey than they are about me, the beekeeper, messing with their stuff. But also, what's really cool is bees talk to each other by smells. So they let out pheromones, and the other bees smell it. So they have an emergency pheromone that says the bald guy is messing with our stuff, let's get him. And so the smoke doesn't let one bee communicate to another bee that says panic, panic, panic. So it keeps them calm by not letting them talk to each other and focuses them on eating honey instead of on me.
So it doesn't hurt the bees?
No, it doesn't hurt the bees at all, although it scares them a little bit. So that's why you don't want, when you're a beekeeper, you don't go in the hive all the time. I'm not opening the hive up every day. It's once or twice a month tops.
Okay. Do bees do some things that us humans do?
Well, that's cool. Yes, they do a lot of things that humans do. We already talked that they poop, right? Everybody poops. But they actually, something that's really cool about bees that not a lot of people know is that they make bread, which is really cool. They take pollen and they add nectar to it, and they kind of mix it up. So it's this really nice high protein meal that they store inside of cells, just like they lay eggs and store honey. And so later in the wintertime, when it's really cold outside and they need a lot of energy, they get to go back and eat that, what's called pollen bread.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how do you become a beekeeper?
Well, you just have to get some bees. That's it.
So anybody could be a beekeeper?
Anybody can be a beekeeper. But you don't have to be a beekeeper to do good things for bees. All you have to do is plant bee-friendly flowers in your yard. don't spray pesticides in your garden or on your lawns. Yeah, I mean, and buy local honey. You know, support beekeepers who are doing their best.
Mr. Rohn, that is all we have today. Anything else you want to say?
No, I hope that you guys learned something and that you learn a lot about bees. Go out there, save the world.